So hi everyone, this is the fellow passenger here, and today I have the honor to interview Jan Pulsford, who I had the honor to meet a good few weeks ago now. She is the organizer of the Woodbridge Ambient Music Festival. And if you're not in the UK, Woodbridge is a town in Suffolk. And the connection, one of the big connections to ambient is that's where Brian Eno comes from. So Jan, thank you so much for coming on board.
Nice to be here. Lovely to see you again.
Yeah, thank you. So when I've been in this part of the world, I'm not in Woodbridge myself, but not too far away. At some point, I heard a rumor that there was an ambient music festival. And for everyone who knows me more about the fellow passenger stuff that I do, I have another side project called Home at Last, which is much more ambient. And I had the opportunity to perform at this festival. And I'm amazed. I had no idea that there was such a thing as an ambient music festival. So I would like to hear, maybe we start with you, Jan. Like, what's your background and connection to ambient, perhaps?
Okay, well, I've been doing music a long, long time. I started off in the 80s when I had a love affair with an Oberheim OBXa and carried on through working with a lot of pop icons of the time, like the Thompson twins and Cyndi, Lauper, and took me all over the world. And I ended up being over in the States for a while. And whilst I was over there, because there was a big electronic scene in, believe it or not, it was Nashville in Tennessee that I was living. And I got introduced to space music and this ambient music, and I didn't really know what it was. And I explored it a bit and realized that, you know, it was just music to relax and unwind, and I really enjoyed it. Of course, it's so intertwined with electronic music as well, which suited me. And I was exploring virtual worlds at the time. This was back in the 2000s. So we were streaming, we were doing online concerts back then. Before streaming was so commonplace. And I was doing these electronic music concerts online, and I would throw in a little bit of ambient every now and again. And I realized the positive effect that it was having, that is what people loved, rather than the angst-driven sort of electronic music that a lot of us were doing at the time. And when I found out, and this is just my own story, of course, but when I found out that people were tuning in from their homes, from hospitals, from all kinds of things to get this, what some people would call a musical massage. And so I went, you know, this is a real positive side to music here. So I dedicated myself really to playing ambient music online. And I used to have radio shows. Like I said, I've been into streaming for a long time. And it became quite popular, my ambient music world. And then I moved back over to the UK, continued with the ambient music world. I was broadcasting to a lot of local radio stations and that. And about 6 years ago, the mayor of Woodbridge, and how did I end up in Woodbridge? I just liked it. I just felt it was just such a wonderful place. I loved the river. And I always remember the first day I moved here, and I looked over the river and I saw these mounds. I went, what are those mounds? Because, of course, in Tennessee and in the States, you have the mound builders. It was a big thing. And, of course, over here, you have the mounds from Sutton Hoo just across the water. So the mayor of Woodbridge, who I got to know, again, by accident, and she wanted to do this festival, a Beowulf festival. Beowulf, of course, is a big Anglo-Saxon story, which I believe, probably came from Sweden with the Geats and that. And I just got fascinated with this, and she wanted me to do the music for it. And I got the chance to light up the Tide Mill with projections, which was such an incredible chance. It was absolutely wonderful. We did the music from a boat alongside the Tide Mill. Projections, 35 minutes of music that I wrote for it. And that was the beginning of my festival adventure. Because, of course, once you do that, you get hooked on what you can do. So we did another one the next year. And then the next year, COVID hit. And that changed everything for everybody. My studio, Mothership Studios that I had over at Bentwaters. So, of course, there was a lot of American bases here in the Cold War, and when they left, eventually they've all been turned into, well, artist kind of places. So there's a lot of music on the old bases, and COVID put paid to mine. Moved on from that, trying to get back into something over after COVID, and I decided to do 7 very small festivals called Spirit of Place, going through 1 spirit per month. Like we had the Spirit of the River, Spirit of Ambient, Spirit of Beowulf, blah, 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 blah. Did that. And that's how come I met Tom Rogerson. Am I talking too much?
No, go for it. That's absolutely perfect.
Okay, good. Now, Tom Rogerson had done this wonderful album with Brian Eno called Finding Shores.
Mm.
And for my ambient music world shows, I would be abreast of what was going on in releases and of the ambient music, and I saw this album. I went, oh, that looks interesting. So I bought the CD, I hasten to add, bought the CD and then started playing it. And as I was playing it, I was really drawn to the style of Tom Rogerson, the piano player on it, and of course the way that Brian Eno had manipulated all of the sounds. And it just seemed very, very familiar. And then when I looked at the names, I realized, hang on, this is about this area.
Ah.
And this Tom Rogerson, you get this idea in your head as to what somebody might look like, what they might be like. And as I mentioned before about the Tide Mill, which actually still mills flour, and the miller, because this is a very small place, you get to know everybody. So I'm having a cup of coffee with Dan the miller the one morning, and he says, there's a piano player has moved in next door to me, and I keep hearing him playing and everything. And I just knew it had to be Tom Rogerson.
And it was.
And so Dan the miller invited Tom down to have a cup of coffee, and we had a chat and one thing and another. Of course, young guy, nicest guy, absolutely wonderful with his young family. And so I asked him if he would consider playing at the Spirit of Place festival that I was doing. And I just couldn't believe it. When he said, oh yes, it'd be great to play back in Woodbridge, which is where he went to school and where he was from. So he came in, and I'll never forget, because we had this ramshackle affair out the back of the Angel, which of course you played at.
Yeah.
It didn't look anything like that. It was a car park, and we turned it into a festival with mandala sheets up, and we really turned it out. It was just great. But anyway, it was still had that element of being a pub. People chatting and drinking or something another. And Tom, he said to me as he walked out, he said, I'd really like it if people were quiet. for my performance. So I made an announcement.
Yeah.
And in the car park of the Angel pub, there was silence for 40 minutes.
Wow, yeah.
It was, and it just showed the power of that kind of music. Silence. So next year, I said to Tom, why don't we do an ambient music festival here? And Tom said, call it Woodbridge Ambient Music Festival. I went, okay. So we set about doing it. But of course, the big concert that I wanted to do, which was so important to launch the festival, we had Tom Rogerson and friends in St. Mary's Church, about 200 odd people. And I managed to sell it out. It was Tom Rogerson with Talvin Singh, and then Claire O'Connell and Liam Byrne, a cellist and a viola da gamba player who'd come over from Berlin. And Brian Eno came and introduced it and talked about ambient music and Woodbridge. You couldn't have asked for a better.
I wish I would have been there. I saw the video and it looked and sounded very impressive.
Yes, it's really good. So then, of course, doing a festival by yourself takes an enormous amount of work. So we had the COVID thing again last winter, and I got it really badly. I wasn't feeling too well, and I thought, I don't know if I'll do it again. And then somebody persuaded me to do it, and lo and behold, I managed to pull it together. I've just finished doing the paperwork and everything for it. It's an enormous amount of work, but oh my Lord, what a fantastic thing.
Just for the listeners who haven't been or looked into the festival, just to give a little bit of an overview, there was quite a number of artists and actually quite a few venues as well. It started on the Friday and it finished on the Sunday. That's right. How many artists and DJs and things, roughly, I don't know if you have an exact number, but otherwise, just to give people an idea, because there were quite a few performances.
I think all in all, there were probably close to 60 people involved. On the Friday night, well, we showed the film, of course, of the concert in the church last year, but we also, because there's a link to the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, which was one of the most famous books. Not only have we got Beowulf here, we've also got the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. And somebody who I'd met through the Ivors Academy has said, I'd love to do some installations. And he came up and we went and we worked on some which we showed that evening. And it was just a fantastic event. It was quite a bit different. But it just shows that the whole genre can go in so many different ways. That's the thing about ambient music. I remember going down to Ipswich Radio one day, and there was a guy down there who was doing a heavy rock, heavy metal show next. And he said, well, there's ambient metal, and
Yeah.
So I wanted to try and show the breadth of that. On the Sunday night, for example, we had Byron, who last year rapped over ambient. This year it was a little bit more subdued. He did some lovely poetry over the ambient. But then on the Saturday, we had a lot of people walking along the river, and that was a really beautiful event. We tried that the previous year with the Floating Equal, because I really wanted it to be on the autumn equinox. I thought that was a good thing to have every year.
We're so lucky with the weather that weekend as well. It was absolutely perfect. It couldn't have been better. Now, I think with a lot of genres of music, sometimes people wear that genre on the outside. Like sometimes you can tell if someone is into metal or
yeah.
like it's not always, of course, but ambient doesn't feel quite the same way to me. And if you walk down the high street or whatever, like, it's much more difficult to even know it. Do people even know what it is? And you don't know where the people who listen and enjoy ambient music, you just really don't know where they are because you don't see them in the same way. And also, it's not like you get an ambient night at your local pub very often. It's not very often. But I'm wondering how did you, when you were organizing this and through your contacts, a lot of those artists, were they sort of local-ish or had they traveled far? How did you find them? Or were they through your radio show?
Well, a lot of it was through the EMOM movement, which is the electronic music open mic, which I got introduced it when I had Mothership Studios, and we used to have EMOMs over there. And then when COVID came, the lockdown came, we moved online, and so people like Barry Hardwired, who runs the Norwich EMOM, he introduced me to a lot of the East Anglian musicians who have just kept, people like Tristan Burfield and, like I said, Barry Brodenson, Girl in the Gale. They're very much in this area. The Dronescape came down from Yarmouth, so the East Anglian thing really came from Mothership. The other things are just from, well, just people that you meet. For example, Tom Grieg, who did the most beautiful ambient DJ set outside on Wisstocks by the river. I met him in an art gallery, and we were just talking. I'm one of those people, I do walk around a lot and I talk to a lot of people. And then there was another one who came down from Stockport, who was a mentor for the Ivors. And I'm a mentor for the Ivors. And he came down. And then there were two other people who were part of the Future Music Symposium for the Ivors, which I'm a member of. And they came down to do the community centre on the Sunday afternoon. That was Pip Greasley and Sophia Space Agency. And funnily enough, we'd never met in person. We'd only ever had Zoom meetings.
Please enlighten me. I'm not sure I know what the Ivors is.
The Ivors Academy, it's have you heard of the Novello Awards? It's something that's quite a big thing in the UK. Over in the United States, they have the Grammys, and
I see.
Over here they have the Ivors. It's a similar kind of thing.
I see. Yes, okay, yeah.
And they do run a really nice mentoring thing in conjunction with Help Musicians, and I don't know how I get involved in all these things. Somehow or other I do. And
I suppose one thing leads to another too. I'm sure you must have met lots of new people just through the festival itself.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. It's just really
how was
lovely.
How was it perceived by Woodbridge? Did you get any sort of feedback? I suppose one of the great things that when we were, to give a little bit of context for our listeners, one of the venues outside, there was a couple of cafes and restaurants, and part of the Saturday, like, performances were outside, and the DJ you mentioned, who had an amazing record collection. Yes, I think a lot of people out there at the restaurants, they probably were not necessarily dedicated ambient listeners, but I got the impression that, like, people enjoyed it. It was not as if you would have put up like a rock band that could have offended some. It was just such a good atmosphere. Did you hear anything? Did anyone come up to you who didn't know this was on, or did you have anything like that? Or people asking about it?
I think that it's been an interesting way to introduce ambient music or reintroduce it to Woodbridge, because leading up to the festival, I would take my little PA, my mobile PA down, and I would sit down and play ambient music every Sunday morning. And so that would gather some kind of interest. And mostly I would get asked, what is ambient music? Because a lot of people don't know what ambient music is.
Oh, I would be excited to hear. How do you answer that question?
Oh, I think that's another program. I mean, the answer that I would usually say to people is, oh, it's just music that doesn't get in the way. It's music to relax, unwind, music that doesn't bother you. It's music that you can think. I mean, we all like to have a bit of hooligan music every now and again, but sometimes with all the noise that's going on, isn't it nice to just have something to chill out to? And that's what people would say. And whenever I've played out, people have come up and said, that sounds nice. That's because it's an interesting, as opposed to what you would hear on the radio these days, and in a lot of clothes shops and things like that. It's very, very different.
Would you say, I mean, I know this question is going to be very hard because I have no idea how I would answer it, but what would be, if someone asked you and you explained that to them and they would ask you, okay, what shall I listen to get an idea? What would you say?
Oh gosh,
that is a hard one. Yeah.
It is hard. I suppose I would say, well, the one that started it all off was music for airports. So why not just go right back to the beginning and then experiment through that? Most of my music over the years I have heard from online. Back in '93, when the internet started, that to me was the greatest thing that had ever happened in my life.
Did you know what to look for then? As in, like, did you already know then that I want to find more ambient music? Or
no, I just like music that was a bit different. And I just found, especially like doing the shows, and with me, because I play and I write music so much, I'd walk along the river and I'd come back and play something, and then I'd broadcast it. I mean, what a wonderful thing to be able to do. And funnily enough, I'll tell you that all of these festivals, I thought, oh, this would be great, I can play. And no, you don't have time.
But you do. But if you did have time, you would have. If there would have been space and time for you to be in the mental state and put something together.
Absolutely, because what happened, I always remember Spirit of Place. I started playing because I play piano and computers. I started playing, I'll never forget. I go, right, here we are, festival. Jan, what about this ticket? And this is how it is, because you are the organizer, of course, and that's how people see you. And so you're trying to play, but they see the organizer. And so I realized then it's just not worth it. If I'm going to play, it has to be a separate thing.
What about, do you make, even if it's not necessarily for a performance, would you make ambient music at home for pleasure? Do you do that?
Well, it's for pleasure.
Or is it work, regardless, because you're in the music industry?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? When you spent your whole life making a living out of music, a lot of the time music isn't your hobby because it's your 24/7.
Yeah.
And it's not just music, it's everything that goes with the music. It's the technology. it's the websites, it's the social media, it's everything that surrounds music. You know, doing the artwork and things. It's all that creative stuff. So then music becomes part of it. It's not the
It's
main,
not the, yeah, I
if
understand.
you know what I mean. Yeah. So do I make it for pleasure?
Or do you make it full stop? Or is it only if you get commissioned to make something?
No, I make music because
Yeah.
I love it. You know, I would love to, and I'm fascinated with how things work. That's why I'm good with the technology. I want to know how it works, and yes, so it's all a pleasurable experience, I would say. Yeah, very much so.
Now, you were saying earlier that you're keeping your finger on the ambient pulse of what might be coming out and things. I struggle to know exactly where to look. There are sometimes either online or certain shops in London or whatever where I like, when I am there or I'm checking out something online, that I take the opportunity and looking into the ambient things. But do you have any good sources, or is it friends and that sort of thing? How do you stay on top of the ambient world?
I think my favorite go-to place is Bandcamp.
Mm.
Because I like to support obviously independent music, and if you look around, you'll stumble across some lovely independent artists, and I think labels are using Bandcamp as well, of course. But that's where I've got most of my music that I play, and say for example with this, I asked people to send in MP3s. Yeah, and some people did. So I have a nice collection.
Do you have a vision for where you would like to take the festival, or is there something you want to reveal?
I would like to do it again next year with people who are going to help, you know, so that there is a team of people who are doing stuff, because it's an amazing amount of work to do. I mean, you have to just commit yourself, and it's a bit like producing an album, which I think is why I took to it so well, because I've produced a lot of albums in my life. And
so would you want it to grow? Would you want it to grow, or would you want it to be roughly what it is, but you just don't want to do it absolutely all by yourself? Do you have any like artists that you would love to perform one day, or I don't know?
I think that will happen naturally.
Yeah.
But if we had a team, we'd be able to take care of it a lot more. If we had money, that's another thing. You know, somebody who can write grants properly, and get some sponsorship, and because it all takes money to do. And I think it will grow. We had Tom Rogers, who's a YouTuber, and he does a lot of walking around. He's got about 72,000 followers for his channel. And he got in touch and he came up and he did this beautiful 20-minute film, and it's had nearly 16,000 views already. And people are in the comments, you see them, wow, we'll have to come next year. Like yourself, the more people who get to hear about it, I'm sure that there will be more people. It's a lot to organise, because the more people that come, there's going to be all the organisation of places to stay, getting that organised for people, and yeah, with a team we could do a lot more. I don't want it to lose the sort of feeling that it has.
No.
Because it was such a lovely feeling. We don't want to lose that. But it would be nice, like I say, to have more people helping.
There was one magic thing So for everyone who hasn't been to Woodbridge, it's an absolutely lovely place. And it was a lovely weekend generally weather-wise. And different artists played in different venues. And I enjoyed the fact that the festival involved traveling around town. If that makes sense, that you go to different locations, maybe stop and have lunch and do something else for a little bit, and then you sort of come back in. And I think that aspect of it made it, I don't know, it was just, I loved that. It was not that you go to a festival area and you're in the festival area and you're locked in the festival area until it's over, that it was sort of integrated into the town somehow.
Yes.
And I think that was lovely.
Yes. Well, it's a small town. Everywhere is 5 minutes walk away, which is a big plus. And yes, maybe next year we could involve more places as well.
I'm wondering, were sort of shops and things, were they aware of that this was going on? Was it, I don't know, like, what was Woodbridge generally aware of that there was a festival happening?
Well, yes and no. I mean, there's a lot of festivals that go on here. We're very lucky. And I think that people, it was talked about, it was in the local press, and so people were aware of it. But of course, since lockdown, you can't really put many posters up. So most of it was done, most of the promotion was done online, and it worked. It worked. So
I was very impressed. Yes, I was very impressed, and I loved it. So I will definitely come next year if there will be a festival.
It was so nice that you could play as well, because you played up at the Angel.
It was nice, and the weather was nice, and we were outside, and it's the sort of thing that I actually, when I play, I don't mind so much if people are there and chat, because if I can, if what I do can just elevate the atmosphere in general, like that's, I quite enjoy that aspect of it.
Yes, yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Yes, it was just lovely. It was such a lovely way to finish the weekend, that everybody came up and everybody could play, and When you were in the States, and I understand that's where you encountered ambient music to start with. In what context was that? Was someone playing you records, or were you going to an event? Do you remember what it was that? Yes, I do. It was one of these virtual world. Yes.
So what was that? I'm just thinking, in the early 90s, what virtual world could there have been?
This particular one was called Second Life, and it was huge in the States.
Oh, yeah, I know of Second Life. Never tried it, but yeah.
Yeah, and one of my friends, Tony Gerber, this is how Tony Gerber and I went on. Hey, Jan, have you heard of this thing called the internet? No. So then he disappears into the internet for like 6 weeks and comes out, go, wow, have a look. And then, a few weeks later, it'll be, hey, Tony, have you heard of this thing called MP3? And this is how our lives intertwined. We were like this all the time. And so it was Tony, he built a virtual island for Gibson, the guitar people. And he built this virtual island, as I said, virtual worlds, Second Life especially. When it first came out, it was huge in the States. People were just all over it. And so he had an ambient Sunday. Tony, what's ambient music? Because he was into space music, and it all seemed a bit to me. But like I was explaining before, when I started trying it out, which for me, because I was doing electronic music, but it was a slowness, and it was a different. Look at me, I'm going like this. It was a different thing from like drum and bass or anything like that, which I been doing. And again, you could experiment with the sounds, which I loved, being able to experiment to make rhythms out of sounds. And yeah, it was really, really interesting. So that was my first introduction to it. And when I moved to Woodbridge, which is about 13 years ago now, I had no idea about Brian Eno being here or anything like that. It was just sheer coincidence. And then I investigated it a little further. What is ambient music? Like I said,
a tricky one.
Complete new program, really.
Are there any other, for you, important? So you mentioned Music for Airports by Brian Eno. Are there any other, in your world, noteworthy that have made an impact on you, like ambient albums or musicians?
That have made an impact on me? Well, I would say that Tom Rogerson did. Before I met him, I was really intrigued with his piano style. And it was very different. Very different. I liked that. I'm one of those people who doesn't necessarily sit down and listen to music all day long. I listen to sounds so much that, to me, that is like music.
I just want to share this thing. When I was little, there was it was often more about the sound. For example, in an airport or a train station, when you hear them calling out over the speaker system and you have the echoing, or there was, I can't remember how old I was, but sort of doing a sleepover at a friend's place, and they were out in the countryside, and quite far away from their house was a motorway. But if you were very quiet and at night, you could sometimes just hear the lorries go past, but really, really far away. And there was something about that I absolutely loved. It's difficult to... Or my mum told me, when I didn't want to sleep when I was a baby, that she put the vacuum cleaner on in the next room, not in the same room. So that, and I just fell asleep. So I don't know if that was the sort of first thing.
Well, but you see, that's the thing. If you are one of those people, I'm like that. See, I listen to sounds. It's a subliminal kind of thing. You're walking along the river. Why would you put earbuds in to listen to music when it's all around? So when people ask me, what music do you listen to? I go, oh, I don't really listen to music. I just listen. So when you're asking me about, albums, it's really hard for me to say. I listen to Mothership because I put all this ambient music on there, and sometimes I'll just go into radiomothership.com and I put it on. I go, oh, this is nice. Oh, that's nice. Da, da, da.
I think there are a few. Sometimes, like growing up in a small Swedish town, when I had discovered what ambient music was and that was a title, it didn't take long before people started talking about Brian Eno and Music for Airports, but that was before internet. I didn't have, and a local record shop in that small town wouldn't stock such a thing. So it was sort of building up in my head what it was. And on a completely different note and more modern was also when people started talking about the future sound of London. I don't know if you're aware of that. And they did an album called Life Forms. And people described it to me. And I just knew, like, I need to hear this. And I just, like, started building up this picture in my head that, like, oh, what is this stuff? And I can't get hold of it. Or reading about something somewhere. And there was just something magical about it. It's that otherworldly, but I can't just go and get it either. I can't switch on the radio and get it. There was something about the mystery around it as well, somehow.
And I think for me, one of my biggest influences, I must say, was Massive Attack. I just thought, I mean, I know that they're not ambient per se, but I just thought sonically what they did was so fantastic. I would put on one of their CDs if I was trying to check one of my mixes or something. I mean, they were just superb. And again, anything that is interesting sound wise, something that'll get my interest. And of course, because I do love melody, which, you know, some people go, oh, there's not much melody in ambient, but I do love a bit of melody and beautiful chords as well.
You don't have to rule that out in ambient music, I don't think.
No,
I don't think. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing about ambient music. It can be such a widespread. No rules.
No rules. Yeah.
That's what I would say. Yeah.
Before we wrap up, is there anything else about you or your ambient music journey, or anything else that we need to dip into?
Well, I would really, really like to spend a few months now getting some new music out there online, because I haven't put anything out for some years. Because I'm very much a behind the scenes kind of person, I'm not necessarily an artist per se, but I just like to make music and share it with people, and people seem to like it. And
we will make sure, if you have any links that you would like to share, we put them in the description of the video, so anyone who's curious can listen, and where they should check in when your new album or your new material comes out. And also if there are any other links, obviously, to the festival and anything like that, so people can check in and hopefully come and see it and listen and enjoy it next year.
That would be lovely, because I've just finished a new website of the 2023 festival, Woodbridge Ambient Music Festival.co.uk. I think there's a picture of you in there.
Oh gosh, I hope not. I will have a look.
Up at the Angel. I had hundreds of pictures sent in, and so much music and video from. I said, "Oh yes, I'll collate it. Yes, I'll put it up online." Weeks later, another mega website appears. Beautiful films. Oh gosh, there's this film that somebody from San Francisco sent in called Diop, and it's about the river. Beautiful. And of course, John Rogers' film about the river. And well, anyway, you'll see it. Woodbridge Ambient Music Festival.co.uk.
Absolutely. And we put the link in the description, so you can just go there and check it out. Thank you so much for your time. It's been really interesting to get a little bit of an insight.
Thank you so much, Philip, and thanks for all your support. Yeah.
Thank you. No problem. All right. Let's see.
Cheers.
Thank you.